I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad that you are here. For those of you that I don't know or haven't met me, I'm Amy Smallwood. I'm married to Ryan Smallwood, the senior pastor here, and we just want to welcome you and thanks so much for joining in. Before we start or do anything else, I have to say, Happy Father's Day. Today is Father's Day, and I am so excited to get to be here on Father's Day of all days to celebrate dads. But we're not just celebrating dads. We're celebrating granddads. We're celebrating uncles. We're celebrating mentors. We're celebrating future dads. Really, we're celebrating men today. So happy Father's Day to all of you men out there. Thank you for all that you're doing to invest, to lead, intentionally making impacts in all kinds of groups around you. We are grateful and thankful for you. And so happy Father's Day. We're in a sermon series called Unsung Heroes, and I've really enjoyed this. We've been able to learn about different characters in the Bible, and some of them maybe don't have a lot of limelight, don't get a lot of attention, and so it's been really interesting and neat to get to hear about some of these characters. And so I have a character that we're going to get to hear about and learn about today, and that's Hannah. Now, I struggled picking Hannah because it is Father's Day, and I was like, should I pick a guy for Father's Day? But I have to tell you men out there, if you're listening, Hannah's story applies to all of us. It doesn't matter if we're male or female, moms or dads. This story is, you're going to be able to relate to this no matter where you are and who you are. So we're going to dive in and talk about Hannah. The reason I picked Hannah, I thought it was so important, her story, because have you ever found yourself stuck? You ever found yourself in a place that you didn't want to be, and you could look over here and see something else that you really wanted, that you really, this is where you wanted to be, this is what you wanted to happen, but that's not where you were. You were over here. That's what we're going to learn about, and we're going to learn how to let go when we're in that place. So before we start with Hannah, I was thinking about times in my life that I've been stuck. And that could be little things like stuck in traffic. But there was a specific story that I thought about where I found myself stuck, and I wanted to share that with you today. So several years ago, in fact, this was over 20 years ago, I worked for a ministry called Levi Ministries. It was a local ministry here, and it was found in a family's home. That's where I went to do the ministry, and I actually did their bookkeeping. Just was a little part-time job. And so one day when I went to this home, this family's home, to do my bookkeeping, I have to tell you, to get to my office, I would actually go through their house, go out the back door, and then the office was actually located on the back side of the garage. So it wasn't in the garage, but it was on the back side of the garage. So when I went out the back door, I would just walk down the sidewalk and just open the door to the office right there. And it was just this little room. So this day, I was in my office and doing my bookkeeping, and the family let me know they were going to leave and run some errands. And that happened frequently. And so I would just lock up and leave whenever I was done. So on this particular day, I finished up my stuff. The family had already left. And so as I'm leaving, I leave the office and I go ahead and lock that door and shut it. And then I go to the back door so I can leave, and the back door to the house is locked. And so I realized all of a sudden the family forgot. They just forgot I was there, and they locked the back door. And so this was 23 years ago. So let me tell you, I had a cell phone. And it wasn't a bag phone, by the way. It was actually a flip phone. This was cutting edge. I was like the coolest cat. So with my flip phone, but you didn't take your cell phone with you everywhere. It literally only was for emergencies, and I kept it in my car. So I found myself locked out of the office that had a phone, locked out of the house that had a phone, and I'm literally stuck in the backyard. And so I'm beginning to weigh my options, feeling stuck. And at that time, I was working on my counseling license, and I had some clients that I had scheduled appointments with I needed to go see. And so waiting around in the backyard for this family to come back really was not an option for me. And so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna have to get out of this backyard a different way. And really the only way was to climb the fence. So I began to scale the fence. Now you have to know the fence in the backyard had pickets going across. So I could put my feet on the pickets going across to scale up. Now this fence was about 50 feet tall. Not really, but it felt 50 feet tall. It was probably an 8-foot or 10-foot fence. I don't know, but it was really tall when I was climbing it. So I climbed to the top of the fence and I'm holding on to the pickets. And on the other side of the fence, so the front yard side of the fence, it's just a straight drop. There's no pickets going this way, so I can't put my feet on anything. I'm just gonna have to jump over. And the thought of just jumping down to the ground, it just seemed too high to me. So instead, I decided to put my foot one at a time over and kind of let the pickets gouge my stomach, and I'm kind of sliding down the pickets like this. So if you can imagine me, I've got both legs now over the fence. The pickets are gouging my stomach and I'm wiggling down the fence, okay? This is what happens when you are stuck. Unfortunately for me, the pickets caught my bra, my undergarment, and it stuck. And so I didn't realize it, but as I'm sliding down, my bra sticks to the top of the picket. And all of a sudden, as I'm going down now, the front side of the fence, I can feel that coming up. And I'm literally stuck hanging on the fence by my bra. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced something like that, but to say that I felt panicked in that moment is a complete understatement. Have you ever heard of someone that said, I had so much adrenaline rushing through me, I could have lifted a semi? Let me assure you, I could have lifted a car, a semi, I don't even know what. So let me tell you, I did a chin up like I have never in my life done. I hoist my body up so fast, I unhook myself from that picket and I fall to the ground. Now, I have to tell you, looking back on feeling stuck on the fence by your bra, let me tell you something. I felt exposed. I felt embarrassed. I felt vulnerable. I felt panicked. Man, we can relate to that. Sometimes when we feel stuck, that's where we're at. We do feel those things. And I can assure you, I wanted out of that situation and I wanted over here. And that's what we're going to learn about with Hannah today. So if you have your Bible, we're going to open that up to 1 Samuel chapter 1. 1 Samuel is in the Old Testament. It's fairly close to the beginning of the Bible. But 1 Samuel chapter 1, and that's where we're going to hear the story of Hannah. We believe in the inspired Word of God. We believe the authority that the Word has over our lives. And we believe if we hear and obey these words, we will find true life transformation. Amen. So let me set this up. Hannah is married to a guy named Elkanah. Elkanah has 2 wives, Hannah, and he also has another wife, Peninnah. And by the way, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing these names right, so just go with it. And so we're going to start in verse 3 of 1 Samuel chapter 1. And it says, Now the man, which is Elkanah, used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. So you have to know, back culturally in biblical times, for a woman, if she was not able to have children, a lot of her worth was tied to having children. So for Hannah not to be able to have a child at this point in time in her life, I can only imagine some of the things that she felt in that situation. Worthlessness, unworthy, ashamed, sad, despair, frustration, all kinds of things stuck in her situation. She wanted a child. She wanted over here, but that's not where she was. She was stuck in a place where she wanted something else. For you, for me, that can look a lot of different things. We can feel stuck in a job, wanting something different, wanting that door to open, a financial promotion. We can feel stuck in a marriage, maybe a broken relationship where we want maybe a relationship restored and it hasn't been yet. We can feel stuck in an addiction that we can't break free from. There's tons of different scenarios. I mean, even stuck on a fence by your bra, where you feel stuck and you feel like you want something different. And that's where Hannah found herself. And what we see in verse 7 is it says year by year, year after year, they did this. They went to the temple to do their sacrifice. And year after year, Hannah wept and would not eat. This situation for her had gotten to a point where it was affecting her physically. She wouldn't eat. Sometimes that can happen to us. Sometimes that's all we want to do is eat. Or maybe we have headaches or stomach aches. Maybe we don't even have enough energy to even get up out of bed some days. We can feel so overwhelmed by our circumstance. So it affected her physically. It affected her mentally. This is all she was consumed with, was feeling stuck, wanting this over here, but not being able to have it at that point. It absolutely affected her emotionally. It says that she wept year by year. She would come up and she would weep. And it affected her spiritually. We can relate to those things. No matter where we are, we can relate to times where we've been so overwhelmed and affected by our circumstance and feeling stuck in a situation. When she cried out, her focus really was on what she didn't have. That's where she was in that moment. And I'm not faulting her for being in that place. But I have to say, lots of psychologists and counselors talk about this all the time. But if our focus, or whatever we think about, I'll say it this way, whatever we think about, that's what grows. So if Hannah's focus is on what she doesn't have, then that's what's going to consume her, right? So if we read on, we're going to look in verse 9, chapter 1, verse 9, and it says, after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. I think this is really important for us to note. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. Hannah was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. So it's interesting, something has changed in Hannah. We've already learned this. Year by year, they come up to make the sacrifice, and Hannah weeps and she doesn't eat. This is the pattern. This is what happens year after year because she's stuck in this circumstance. But for whatever reason, on this year, on this day, in this moment, Hannah rises. Something is shifting. Something's changing in her. It's like she's making a decision to do something different than she has in all the times past. And it tells us what she does. It says she was deeply distressed and she prayed to the Lord of hosts and she wept bitterly. See, in the other time, year by year, she was weeping and she wouldn't eat. But she wasn't taking this to the Lord. She was totally consumed with it. That's all she was focused on, is what she didn't have. But in this moment, she does something different. She makes a choice. She rises up and she takes it. She takes it to the Lord. What we learn about when we take something to the Lord is our perspective changes. Something shifts inside of us. And I think this is so amazing. Hannah began to not focus only on what she could get from God, but she began to see what she could give to God. And I want to say that again because I really want us to kind of wrap our minds around that concept. Hannah began to not only focus on what she could get from God. She definitely was asking something from God. But that's not where her focus only was, what she could get from God, but she began to focus on what she could give to God. And let me show you why I'm saying that. If you'll keep reading where we were in verse 10 or verse 11, and she vowed a vow and she said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. So she says, Lord, I'm going to pour out my heart to you. I'm going to spend time with you and let you know my desires and what's going on and where I'm at with this. But if you will give me this, I'm going to give it back to you. I'm going to let him serve you. She didn't only focus on what she could get from God, but she began to focus on what she could give to God. It's so important and it's so amazing to see what he can do if we'll take something to him. And so then if you read, skip down just a little bit to verse 17. So Hannah has a conversation with Eli, the priest, and he says, what's going on? What are you doing? And she says, I'm praying. I am praying to the Lord. And Eli in verse 17 says, he answered, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant you your petition that you have made to him. And Hannah says, let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then the woman went her way, and she ate, and her face was no longer sad. I just love that so much. When we pour out our heart and we spend time with the Lord, he changes us. He changes us. And it's so amazing because we need to understand this. Hannah does not have a baby when she rises up and goes her way. Hannah is not pregnant when she goes her way. Her circumstance is exactly like it was when she took her desire and her need and poured out her heart to the Lord. But something on the inside of her changed. And that absolutely can happen to you and I. When we feel stuck, whether we feel stuck hanging by our bra on a fence and feeling exposed, or it's something completely different, if we will, instead of being all consumed by what we don't have, if we will rise up and we will take our heart, our requests, our desires, and bring them to the Lord and spend time with him, then we can go our way and we can eat and our face will no longer be sad. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, Hannah was changed. And so I want us to look in verse 19 and 20 now. It says, they rose early in the morning and they worshiped before the Lord, and I know she did. And then they went back to their house at Ramah. She went back to what she knew. She went back to her same circumstance, her same situation. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. And what I would leave you with is that the Lord remembered her, and the Lord remembers us. He remembers you. He sees you, and he sees whatever circumstance you find yourself in today. And that feels encouraging to me, that the Lord of hosts, the King of kings, sees me, and he knows me, and he remembers me. And so wherever you find yourself, I really encourage you to take it to the Lord. Pour your heart out. Give your desire to the Lord. God didn't give Hannah her desire until Hannah gave her desire to God. So you give that desire to the Lord and let him, it's not anything we do, and just let him begin to change us and shift us on the inside. And then there is no telling how he will answer on the outside. So let me pray for us this morning. God, you know every circumstance. You know every need and every desire. You see that, and I pray that you meet us where we are. If we're hanging by a thread, if we're hanging on a fence, whatever it is that we're wanting, that we're desiring, God, I pray that you meet us in that place. Father, help us to trust you enough, to be open to you enough that we can pour our heart out to you. Father, help us rise up and spend time with you so that we can go our way, we can eat, and that our face will no longer be sad. God, give us that joy and that peace, no matter what our circumstance is, that can only come from you. And I ask this in your powerful name of Jesus. Amen.